All right, I'm gonna show you the point of the assignment really is to work with the Cascading Style Sheet Designer and to get used to that tool. In order to do that, what I'm going to do is work with a pre-existing assignment. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to define a site. And so we're going to go down here to Manage Sites. And I've got a bunch in the background here, just ignore those. We'll say New Site. This one will be working with CSS. I'm going to specify in Creative Cloud, and then I'm going to hit my browse to go to this folder that I've already created in terms of a root directory for my site, and I'm going to say Save. Okay, so what I haven't done is I haven't defined my server. We'll do that later when the time comes to use it. So now it opened up all of the files that are part of that particular site definition. And I'm going to open up index. Okay, let me shrink this away for the moment. And you can see the site. This is the assignment. This is my version of the cartoon character profile from the previous assignment about coding. Now in that previous coding assignment, we worked a lot in code view. And you learned about editing HTML and CSS using code view. This assignment is very similar, but the difference is that this time we want to stay in design view and we want to work primarily with the CSS Designer. If you've worked with CS6 Dreamweaver before, it's very similar. The difference is in CS6 it's called CSS Panel, and in CC it's called CSS Designer, and they do the same thing, but the interface is a little bit different. And so I'm going to show you the same thing in CC that also exists in CS6. Now, before we get started, I just want to give you a little bit of a tour of this site so you know how it's structured. So if we go over here to Code View and we look at the source code, it's a very it's a very sectioned, a very structured HTML. So you got your head section, of course, and it links to an external style sheet. And then you got your body section. And then within your body section, there's this thing called wrapper. And the idea of wrapper is that you'll notice how there's a box, like the content of my page is inside this box, and this box floats in this kind of mauve-looking background. That's actually quite intentional, and the idea there is that sometimes you don't want to risk what size or resolution monitor your viewer has, your user, and so one thing you can do to take control is if you set the size of the wrapper, then you know exactly to the pixel what the dimension of your content is, and then if their monitor differs in size, then this background will shrink and grow depending on the size of their monitor without affecting the size of the actual content. So that's kind of the idea of the wrapper. All right, then we have a header section which defines this area here where our header is, and then we've got a navigation section, which at the moment is this bar down the left side with links to Danger Mouse related sites. And then we've got a section called section, which is just the content of the page, right? It's all of this stuff in blue that represents the content of the page. And then finally down here we have a footer, which in the code you see as footer. So it's a very structured page as far as header, nav, section, footer, right? Those four sections are delineated quite specifically. And then under CSS styles, if we look at the styles, one thing I've done here that I like is I took the suggestion of the lynda.com presenter and I created my color palette and I pasted it into my style sheet under comments. So these little tags right here delineate comments. Nothing within comments is acted upon by the browser. It's just there for me, the designer. And that way you kind of know the colors you're working with, and then you can apply them to specific styles as you go down. So basically what you have here is all the elements you saw in source code are defined here in the styles. The body, the wrapper, the header, the nav, the section, and the footer. In addition, I've got a couple of styles that are specific to images, 2 different kinds of images I have in there. And then also you've got this section down here, which is my links, my pseudo class link styles, which show the different states of a link. Okay, so that's the structure of the page. And now that we know the structure of the page, we're going to leave code and try not to come back to it. We want to stick with the design tools this time around. So what we're going to do is open up CSS Designer, and notice at first that it tells you, it lists the sources of styles within this document, within this that affect this HTML page. You can have more than one, right? The idea of cascading style sheets is you can have an external style sheet, you can have an internal or embedded style sheet in the style section of the HTML document, and then you can have inline styles within the HTML code in the body of the document, HTML document itself. You can also have multiple versions of external style sheets. So this heading right here for media, you can actually make your page detect whether the viewer is using a PC or a tablet or a phone, and then use a different style sheet to format the page in different ways depending on the media that they're using. In this case, all of my styles exist in this styles.css page. And when I click on it, all of the styles that are defined in that external style sheet are listed right here. Most of them are classes. Here's one ID. Actually, most of them are actually CSS selectors, HTML selectors like body and header and nav. Those pre-exist. So those are not classes. Those are actually CSS selectors, or CSS elements, I should say, HTML elements. But they still act as classes in terms of how you work with them. And then these are called compound classes, and essentially it's the combination of an HTML selector and the class. So there's a couple of those going on, and then of course I have my pseudo classes for my link states. Okay, so we're going to start out by editing some things on the page, just by editing their styles. For instance, on my page here, let me tuck this away for a second. On my page here, I've got this nav section, which goes down the left side of the page. Well, what if I wanted my nav section to be on the right side of the page? So what I would do under CSS is I'd go down to nav, and you can see all the properties that are set for it. So this is one thing that differs from CS6. In CS6, it would list the code. And in CC, it does list the code, but it also shows it graphically with a graphic representation of the box model. So in HTML, everything is done with the box model, where you have the content, you have the padding, you have the border, and you have the margin. So this graphic is showing us how the margin is set, where there's 10 pixels of margin to the right of this box. But that's not what I'm going to focus on first. The first thing I'm going to focus on is the fact that I've got a float set on this nav to float left, and I want it to float right. So I just click on float right, and now the navigation bar floats to the right side of the page. Okay, now that I know that, I do have a little bit of margin right here that is not working once the navigation is on the right side of the page. So continuing under nav, under margin, I can get rid of this 10 pixels on the right side, and maybe I want to put them on the left. I don't think I need to, because I think I've already got some padding in the other area. So I just do that and hit enter. I can shrink this down, and now that padding has disappeared, or that margin has disappeared. So it's easy as that to change my layout. I'm going to do a couple other things that alter this layout as well. One thing that struck me was the text now in my content area called section is right up against the edge. So under CSS Designer, I can go to section, and I can see that my padding is set to the right side, and that's fine. I don't want to get rid of that padding on the right side, but now I also want some padding on the left side. So I just need to click in here and add in 10 pixels, hit enter, and now I've got 10 pixels where my text pulls away from the left edge of the page, which is exactly what I wanted. Okay. All right, another thing that I'll do is I want to edit this image right here. So I can click on the image, and then under CSS Designer, this is this little icon's getting in the way. That's called the code navigator. It's not what I want to use. There we go. All right, so image.main. What I can do now with image.main is I can see all of the settings. So in this case, I want to float this guy. He's currently floated right. I'm going to float him left. And maybe you want to make it a little bigger. Right now it's 200 pixels. Let's make it 225 pixels. Okay, and then maybe one thing I don't like is that the left side of this image doesn't line up with the left side of the text, and that is because there is a margin built in here that I no longer need now that I've moved it to the left side of the page. So we can set that to 0, and now it lines up with the text. You can do things with a border. Right now I've got a border that's 1 pixel solid with no preset color, which means if it's undefined it defaults to black. So I can make that 1 pixel border into a 2 pixel border. I can make the background color maybe instead of black, let's make it white. And click up here all the way in the corner so it's all F's. Okay, now I've got a white border around it instead of a black border around it. Okay, so all is good. Okay, so it's pretty easy actually to edit these things up pretty quickly. One thing I wanted to do is I wanted to change colors, because one way to change the look and feel of a page in a hurry is to change up the colors. So I've got a color palette saved away. Let me grab it real quick. Okay, I actually did that. I paused the video and I went and grabbed it. One thing that I showed you earlier is that I don't like that split view. Anyway, I used the color palette and I just pasted it in here as a comment. So now I'm going to do exactly the same thing. I'm going to put in a comment and, oops, did that backwards. Okay, and within my comment, I'm just going to paste in a new color palette. And the idea is the same here. Get rid of that extra thingy here. Wow, what happened? Too much code. All right, I've got an alternative color palette. This is what I want to change the colors to. All right, and I'll show you in another time where I got these colors from. But I used a palette builder that helped me figure out colors that are going to go nicely together. These are bright, day-glow kind of colors that might work better with a cartoon, right? So I'm going to leave this code up so I can see what I'm doing. And then what I'm basically going to do is I'm going to say, okay, what did I used to have versus what do I want to have now? So I want both color palettes to show at the same time. And then under CSS Designer, if I click on something like body, right, I can see that I used to use this 533 color, which was this one, and so its new counterpart is going to be this one. So I'm just going to take that color and copy it, and then under body, where I had this background, I'm going to paste over it with my new color and hit enter, and you can see my background just went to a bright purple. Okay. And then in wrapper, I had this one that started 7.6. So 7.6 was my second to last one. So I'm going to replace it with gold, which just starts with CA. So if I go back here and go to wrapper, I take this color and paste over it. And now my wrapper goes bright green. It's kind of a yellow, really. All right, my next one, oops, in CSS Designer, my next one was header. And the header was the 6A number. So 6A, that was my third one down. So now I'm going to use this third one down. And that went to a really dark blue. All right. And then next on nav, I had this one that started with 5F. And so in 5F was my second one. So I'm going to use this second one. Got to get all of it. And that was nav, background. Okay. And so it turned to that color blue. And then next, in footer, I was using 6A. 6A is my third one down. So I changed my footer to this one. I don't have any for image. I don't have any for logo. Links I do. So links, I had this 8.6 color. 8.6. So now I'm going to use this lighter gold color. And I believe I used the same one for visited, but then I have a different one for hover. So for hover, I can look here actually. For hover, I was using this 7.6. 7.6. So now I want to use this gold color. And under CSS Designer, under hover, I'll use that, and under active, I'll use that. Okay, so now I've gone through all of my styles, and I've switched out the colors. I'm going to go now to Design View, and you can see it's bright. Wow. Got well, except for this dark blue, you know, I've got some colors that really pop and really provide a lot of contrast, and it looks pretty good. Couple things I want to change. I don't like how this dark text disappears in the dark background. So under CSS Designer, under header, I'm going to add in a new property. This one is color, which represents the text color. And what color do I want? That's a good question. I want this color. So if I look under CSS Designer for section, no, for wrapper, that is the CAE color. I'm going to copy it. And then under styles, under header, under color, careful, don't click like I click. All right, enter. And now I've got this bright headline to go with this bright page. And I think I kind of want to do the same thing here. I'm going to steal the color, this more muted yellow color from nav. So I can see that it is, oh, it's not nav, it's link. I can see it's this FF color. And I'm going to go to footer. And here under background, not background color, new color. New property called color, which affects text. I'll put that one in. And now my color, my text stands off of that dark background a little bit better. Okay, so far we've been using the CSS Designer to edit existing classes. Now what we want to do is put in a new class. I'm going to put in an image. So I'm going to go into this nav section and I'm going to put in a new, I'm going to put my cursor in here and I'm going to insert an image. And I've got one waiting here by Baron Silas Greenback. That was the bad guy from Danger Mouse cartoon. So I'm going to double click on it and it's going to come into my page and it's way too big. All right, so that's all right. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a style. So I click on this plus sign to add a, no, that's to add a new source. I'm going to click on this plus sign to add a new rule. And this rule is going to be called image dot, I don't know, frog. All right, and so this frog, I'm going to add in the property of width. And I clicked on it. I shouldn't have clicked on it. And we're going to make that maybe 125 pixels. Okay, enter. All right, so you see it didn't affect the frog, and the reason it didn't affect the frog is that although I created the class, I haven't associated this image with the class yet. So if I click on the image, make sure, oh, I'm going to try. Yeah, if I click on the image, make sure that the image is highlighted here. I can go here in the property inspector and under class I can specify frog. Okay, and now my frog width goes to the appropriate width, but it's too tall. It stretched it out of proportion. So go back to CSS Designer and here under image.frog I've got a width specified. Now I can go to height and I'm going to go with auto. And if you go with auto, it'll keep it in proportion. All right, so now my frog kind of fits. Now, one thing that is difficult to deal with is that I didn't specify, or it's not that I didn't specify, it's that in this view, it looks like this frog does not fit within the nav box. But I know from experience that this is a limitation of the view inside Dreamweaver. Once I preview this in a browser, I think it's going to work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up here and I'm going to say File, Save All. And then once that's saved, I want to view. And I can never remember. I don't want to just do live view. I want to go out to an actual browser. So I'm just going to do that. I'm going to go into this to here, and I'm going to pull up my index page, and it's going to open up my page in Firefox. I'll shrink it a little bit so it fits in my recording window. Okay, and now you can see the frog fits nicely inside. The frog fits just fine inside the box. You know, one thing I forgot to do, I was going to do and I forgot, was fonts. So let's do this. I think there's only two places where I specified font families. One of them was in body. So here you can see the font family. If I click on that, I get suggestions. So I'm going to choose one of these existing suggestions. I could go to manage fonts and be specific about it, but I'm just going to choose one of these that pre-exists. And it changed this font, not that one. It changed this font, and I kind of like it, so I'm going to go with it. And it's giving me an advertisement. I'm going to close out the advertisement. Okay, so it changed out all the fonts except for this header. So now I got to go back into CSS Designer, and I can choose the header, and I can choose the font. And I'll go with the same font family, but I want to make sure that that's nice and bold. So I'm going to add a property, which is font dash weight, and I want it to be bold. Okay, and that just boldened it up. There is sometimes a variation of fonts called bolder. That didn't do anything. All right, so I'm going to stick with bold. Okay, so that's just one more dimension of things that you can change. We changed out the fonts. I'm going to also change out, I don't like how my links are showing as underlined. So under CSS Designer, under a link, I'm going to go to, I think it's font dash, no. Must be text. Yeah, text decoration. And I'm going to say none. And what that should do for me is get rid of my underlines. Yep, got rid of the underlines. If I go to live view, if I roll over these, you can see what they do when I roll over them. And I like it. I like what it's doing. Okay, I think we're good. I'm going to go ahead then and I'm going to save this video, and then I'm going to do another video that just goes through the uploading process. You've been through it before, so if you're comfortable with it, all is well. If you're not 100% comfortable with it, then just watch the next video. It should be called something like uploading -cc, something like that. All right.